Welcome back to Coracle's YouTube channel. Today we're going to discuss about money transfer, international transactions, and how does it work when it comes to providing funds for your blocked account. So the first question that I have is how do international transactions work?
Um, at one level, it's pretty straightforward. So let's say if you wanted to transfer money to your blocked account and you go to your local bank and then you tell, hey, I want to transfer 10,000 euros, and then you give them the details of your bank blocked account information, and then yeah, they convert your local currency into euros and they do the transfer.
Okay.
It's on a high level, it's pretty simple.
Right, it sounds
Yeah.
very simple though.
Yeah.
But how does the process go when you get into depth in terms of international transactions?
So it's maybe before we go into the details of the nitty gritty, maybe let's spend some few minutes on how the transaction logistics work.
Right, yeah.
So we have thousands and thousands of banks all over the world, and we want to transfer from one bank account to another bank account. Let's say
Right.
from India to Germany, and these banks, they might have a relationship with each other, they might not. In most of the cases, these are the banks, they are part of the banking network, but they might not have a direct relationship. And this is one information just to know. And these banks needs to communicate with each other, because the payment instruction in India might be different than one in Nigeria and than one in Europe. And to have a common language, so they have something called SWIFT. SWIFT is the term that if we hear around us, SWIFT
Yeah.
proof, SWIFT copy, and so on and so on. So basically, SWIFT is this messaging language that these banks use in this international transaction. So the banking network, so they have a common language. Let's say that's the SWIFT. And some banks have direct access or direct relationship with the destination bank. And if they don't have, normally there is an intermediate bank that comes in between. Let's say you transfer from India, and this bank might not have a direct banking relationship with the blocked account bank, let's say. And then they have an intermediate bank, and they basically takes care of the final settlement. So the bank, there is a handshake, let's say, to be on a very, very simple level. And there is a important step that's involved, that's the clearing and settlement. So the transaction details needs to be verified, because it's a huge amount of money that's moving around from, we have like thousands and thousands of transactions every hour. So it needs to be verified who is sending money for whom. So this is the clearing and settlement process that also part of this transaction. So you have a sender bank, you have an intermediary bank, and the intermediary bank basically deposits the money into the destination bank. And there is the SWIFT message, that's the language that the banks uses, and the money that gets converted and transferred.
Wow, that is quite a lengthy process and much in depth, but it does give a huge picture, a bigger picture on how it works. So that's really good to know. The next question is how can I make a transaction for the blocked account, let's say, or any international transaction for the matter?
Okay. So basically, you need to have a bank that converts the money, or an authorized provider, because you have your local currency, right? So normally if you go to a bank, the bank takes care of the conversion. Basically, they are purchasing euro with your local currency, in this case, let's say INR, and they initiate the wire transfer through the SWIFT network. And the other option is, it's economically more viable option, is there are authorized service providers. So they collaborate with banks, but then they might be providing with a modern solution like digital apps or websites, and very good support compared to banks, and because this is their primary business. And so they will be normally providing a better rate, in terms of like the conversion charges. Usually it's better compared to direct banks.
Ah, that actually brings me to my next question. I have compared charges from banks and other service providers, and there is usually a difference among the same.
Mhm.
what exactly could you explain what exactly are the differences and how is it different from one another?
Yeah. So here it's the classic devil lies in the details. You know, so you have your banking transaction information which you get, let's say, from us, and then you go to a bank one or a provider one, and then you will see, okay, you need to pay this much amount of money. What is clear for you is the blocked amount, right? So 10,000 euros, let's say, and the banks needs to convert it into euros. Basically, they buy from the market and they add a markup. So if you Google today, what is €1 in your local currency, you will not get that rate in
Yeah.
in the bank, because the banks, that's the market price, mid market price, and the banks add a markup to that. So basically, it's a margin,
Right.
and that's the conversion forex margin, and there is a fee attached to the transaction. As we saw, in the network there is an intermediary bank, and the bank, the Swift network. So there is a fee that comes with any transaction, independent of the
Right.
margin that banks add. And there are providers or the banks, they sometimes add additional charges. Nobody knows what those charges are, but it's been also added to that. You might have an
Okay.
attractive margin, but then there might be an additional charge just added to that. On top of this, depends on country to country, there are also local taxes involved. You
Right.
might need to pay the value added tax or some special tax for transaction. For India, for example, there are certain tax that you need to pay if the threshold of the transaction, if it's above the threshold. So all these things come together on top of the blocked amount or any money that you want to transfer. And then depends on the banks and the providers, the service charge might be different. The margin is the huge influence that influences the end result for you, because if you lose 50 points in 10,000 euro, it adds up to a large number, and that's where the
Right.
competition is among. So it is very important to know not only the margin, not because sometimes the banks or the providers say, hey, look, this is the attractive margin, but for a user, like for a student, it is important that to know how much I'm paying in total in my local currency for the transaction.
Right.
That's very important to know, and then you will see, that's why you are seeing differences. Different banks or providers having different markups.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting. How would you suggest when it comes to choosing a service provider or a bank? What would you recommend? How to go about it?
Yeah, following the line of charges, now you know what's going on in the charges. um, it's a natural thinking is, okay, I have my money in my bank, bank account, and I just go to my bank and do the transaction. That's a natural thinking, and you don't have to do that. So this is the first thing I also wanted to like share here. So there is no, like, you can do it outside your bank. So that is the point one. And here, the window shopping or shopping around always helps. you know so it's very important, so you at least check with the different providers. And when you are choosing different providers, it could be a bank or it could be an authorized remittance provider. And there one must be careful. you know
Right.
so authorized doesn't mean they are good. They're authorized provider by the regulatory, but you need to know how established they are in the market. You could read the reviews, and how good is their service. This is usually people don't think upfront. It's always, hey, I'm getting the best price here. It should not be always. Let me put it like this. So good pricing is important, but the service is most important, because after the transaction, if something goes wrong, you really, really need to have their
Yeah.
back to track the transaction, to help you, identify about this transaction. So I always say, look for a good price in terms of like overall pricing, but then also look for how reputed this provider is in terms of reviews. and also give importance to the service.
Okay,
You know,
so
it's a whole package.
it's not just about the money, but also the quality of service that you choose.
It's very important. You know.
Okay.
It's like an insurance. You hope you don't need it, but when a situation comes, and then it could make your life really miserable if they are not
Yeah.
really professional.
Yeah, that is extremely crucial to consider when you have to pick a provider or a bank.
True.
Yeah. So now let's say that I have chosen a service provider or a bank to make the transfer, and I have sent the money across. How long would it take for me to receive a confirmation that it has been received?
So it depends on a lot of factors, from where the money comes from, you know, or from which bank, who is the partner bank, and so on and so on. So in an average, it can happen. The transaction takes around 2 to 5 business days.
Right.
2 to 5 business days. I always say you consider 5 business days because you are prepared for the higher upper limit. So as I mentioned, you know, at the beginning of our discussion, there are quite a few moving parts in it, and anything can go wrong. I mean, it's not really wrong. There might be hiccups here and there that might cause a delay. For example, the bank might, the sender bank might make a mistake while typing in the information, you know, for it. You know, normally they don't, but you never know. You know, the person behind the desk might be doing it for the first time, or I don't know. It's a manual process, right? So they're typing it in, and if there is an error in the transfer instruction, then the intermediate bank might ask for further clarification. Hey, the IBAN, the account number doesn't look right. Can you give more information? Oh, then they will then, you know, like amend the information, but it's causing a delay.
Right, right.
And we have also seen cases where the intermediate bank, that's being the partner bank in the whole chain, is not effective in terms of quickly forwarding the funds. There has been some delays, you know. For example, we have seen a situation there, the money got stuck at the intermediate bank for like few weeks, like 2 to 3 weeks. Then, you know, they traced the funds, they figured out, oh, the money got stuck there, and they released. Then it took a day to get into that. That could be a reason. Other possible reasons could be when the money reaches the, you know, the destination bank, the blocked account in this case, for example. For the compliance department might need to know more information because it's worldwide transactions. You know, they have all the rights to ask for more information. So they ask, hey, who is the sender? I want to know more about this. Or they might ask for the purpose of the, you know, the transaction, because they might miss the purpose of the transaction in the messaging, and then they might need clarification. Then this goes all the way back to the center bank. The bank needs to update it, and then it has to be validated. These things adds up. You know, it's not just a pure straightforward transaction like a UPI transfer. You know, it's just straight away, right?
Yeah.
The next minute it is there. And I'm not telling everyone will face this thing, but you just simply don't know.
It can happen.
Yeah, exactly. And if arranging funds, yeah, it get delayed because of, you know, you are not able to arrange funds. That's a valid reason. But we also observe sometimes students are thinking, you know what, it's just going to take 2 days for me anyway. So I am waiting for 3 more days so I can get a better rate. So suddenly they become a forex traders.
Right.
You know, everyone is becoming some experts, and then I always say, you know what, don't do that. You know, as long as your funds are ready, you know, initiate the transaction and then get the funds ready. This will save a lot of headache because there are so much of a dependencies in the whole process, and you are depending on your bank. The bank might be depending on the intermediate bank, or it might be depending on the receiver bank, and unfortunately there is nothing much we can do. Students usually come to us and they'll say, hey, what's up, what's the why it's not released? It's an all automated. The money comes in, the confirmation goes out.
Yeah.
And we have no influence on, you know, telling the students where the money is exactly, and so on and so on. So long story short, can take anywhere between 2 to 5 days.
5 days.
Just for the peace of mind, plan for, you know, the 5 days.
It's always good to be prepared in that matter.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, you did mention that the confirmation from Coracle is automated. So, only upon, I mean, as soon as the funds are received, there is a confirmation that is automatically sent to the user.
Yeah,
Right?
it's with the other providers or the banks as well. The money
Right.
gets in, the
It's
confirmation goes
immediately.
out.
So,
There is no delay there. It's the crediting.
okay,
Of
okay.
the
That's the
funds.
part where delays can be considered, rather.
Exactly.
Okay, okay.
And then the weekend, the transaction doesn't happen.
Right.
Students go on Friday to initiate the transaction. Saturday, Sunday is not counted as the Monday
working
morning.
day, yeah.
Exactly, Monday morning they expect, oh, where is my confirmation? It's been already third day.
Right, right.
So, and also to consider the banking holidays of Germany.
Right,
There
yeah.
might be some holidays coming, during midweek, so that needs to be also considered.
Okay, so it's always good to be mindful
It's
to
a
understand.
5
yeah.
working days, let's say 2 to 5
Working
working
days.
days.
Yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of
Yes,
difference.
yeah.
That's good to know. So what would you recommend to students if they? I mean, usually delays are not common, but when it happens, what would you recommend for the students who are facing these delays?
As a first step, even before any delays, as a first step, I personally recommend students to get the transaction proof.
Right.
It's called Swift copy or Swift proof. So they themselves can verify if all the informations are matching with what I gave. They get this payment instruction from us to transfer money, and that's the thing that they can check immediately. So usually the Swift is generated end of day. Probably banks give it to them the next day. So this is the first check everybody can do. And if it is getting 5th day, 4th day, the first step is to, if it is from our side, for example, hey, we need more information, we would already write back to the customer, say our bank needs. It's usually the bank asking the bank directly. Very seldom that it comes to us and then we ask for it. And there is something, it's called, you can trace the fund, so the tracer. Sometimes the banks are reluctant to do that because it's like additional work for them. So the students go, hey, where's my money? It's been all taken care. Go check with Coracle. That's usually, go check with the university. So there is nothing much we can do. So we send the students back, no, please initiate the tracer. So there is something called a tracer in the Swift. It's also this part of the Swift messaging network. So it basically tracks the fund. It's all electronic. So It's not about who is telling what. It's a proof. So we encourage students go to the bank or the provider, run a tracer. Then the tracer points out what is going on.
Okay.
Sometimes it shows, oh, look, the intermediate bank asks for the information and it's still waiting for the information.
Oh, okay.
Or the intermediate bank might be holding on to the funds. I don't know, probably it's on hold. When the tracer gets triggered, sometimes you also see the transaction gets pushed.
Right.
Oh, that is a transaction that's been on hold. Okay, they release it. The tracer is the only proof without my word against your word, that shows exactly what it is. Sometimes the tracer also shows that, the funds reached the beneficiary bank and then they're asking for some information. And sometimes the bank provided the information, then the Swift message also shows the tracer shows, it's with the destination bank. Right. Then we will help. In that case, we can, trigger a communication. Hey, can you please figure out why it's on hold? And then they also release it. So, in case of delay, first step is the tracer. That helps. That brings also transparency.
Right.
Then if we tell, no, the money is not with us, with us in the sense like money did not arrive, and the center bank tells, it's been taken care.
You did it. No, we have done it.
Exactly.
Right.
You go check there. It's easy to forward the other side, to blame the other side, and we always say, what, get the tracer. It shows exactly what's going on.
Oh wow, that's where it points out where it is gone wrong or why there is a delay.
Exactly. It's not about whose fault is it. It's more about finding out what's going on. And then we just figure
Make
it out.
Happen,
It makes a lot more easier than doing this ping pong. And usually the student gets frustrated. Hey, I go to my bank tells me go check with Coracle. They come to us, and then our support team say, what, we can't do much. go check with the bank, and
It's a deadlock
yeah,
situation.
exactly. And then in the end, the students understand that, and then they go and then get the tracer. So
So that solves the problem instantly.
yes,
But I think this solution only holds good if there is a delay and not when you've just sent the funds, right?
usually everything goes well.
Yeah, usually, yeah.
Exactly.
That's good to know. So there's this myth that I've heard based on domestic transfer and international transfer. So could you clarify about the same?
Yeah, it's a good question. I hope this clarifies it. Students, they do it for the first time in their life, mostly, and it is a very competitive world out there because the margins on the transactions plays a huge role.
Right.
That's and there are different ways of convincing a customer or potential customer to bring to a company to do the transaction,
Right.
to do the blocked account and whatever. And in this, let's say, game of competition, I see this terminology has been evolved. Evolved in the recent past. Say, we are offering you the domestic transfer possibilities, and then when you hear domestic transfer, sounds easy. Local transfer, you think, yeah, it's
It's
like
within
my
my
GPay
currency,
or
yeah.
my, and then international transaction. I don't know how to do it. It sounds complicated, right? Reflecting on the initial discussion that we had, how the international transfer works, you practically give your money to the local bank or to the provider in your local currency.
Right.
And in most of the cases, in most of the countries, a local resident normally have a local currency account.
Right.
In your case, for example, you have your, let's say,
Yeah.
INR account, and you can do the INR transaction.
Yeah.
Online banking, net banking.
Yeah, it's
But there
right
is no
there.
way you don't hold a foreign currency account, right? And there is a bank or a provider that converts your local currency into a foreign currency. In this case, it's euro. So as an end user, for you, it is always a local transfer, right? So it is a domestic transfer. Either you make a transfer, or if you go to the bank and in which you have your account, and in this account you have your money, so you are not doing any transfer. But basically the bank takes the money from your account, they convert it into euro, and they take care of the transaction. Or
Right.
you go to a authorized provider, a forex provider, then they say, hey, please transfer your money to our account, then we will take care of the rest of the transaction. Then you
Right.
do the local transfer. So the bottom line, it's a loosely coined term, foreign transfer. The whole transaction is a foreign transaction, but for the end user, it is always a domestic transfer.
Domestic transfer.
The
Yeah.
moment, because you give the money in your local currency, then the authorized bank takes care of the conversion and so on and so on. So for you, the euro doesn't have it doesn't come into the picture of the transaction. You will say, what, just tell me how much you have to pay. Then the bank or the provider will tell you,
Yeah.
charges, blah blah blah, all these things, you have to pay this much. That's it.
Wow, that just sounded like a very fancy word when I heard about the myth at first.
Yes.
But in the end, it is domestic transfer, and I don't understand. I mean, sorry, let me rephrase that. Well, yeah, that is definitely a myth which I had heard pretty commonly when I first started the process for my blocked account. But logically speaking, it is domestic transfer by the end
And
of
for
the
the
day.
marketing purposes, domestic transfer sounds very
Fancy,
attractive. And easy. Yeah.
simple and less complicated, though it is logically pretty much the same. Wow. Well, thank you for clarifying that. So now I would be asking a couple of frequently asked questions, which I have collected from the users and the
Okay.
customers. So the first question is, can one transfer additional funds apart from the blocked amount?
Yes. Short answer is yes. A couple of reasons to that. Sometimes the university, if you're coming for a university where you have to pay the semester fee or sometimes an additional fee, or private universities, for example, then the consulate or the embassies might ask, hey, you also need to deposit this 2,000, 3,000 euros So in our case, students, they don't need to do anything extra. So the transaction details remains the same. They just transfer additional amount, and this additional amount is not blocked, but then they get an additional confirmation telling on top of this blocked 11,000 euros, this 1,000 euros is blocked for and unblocked for, on the student's name.
Okay. So it's always good to at least mention or specify the amount that you're sending in apart from just the blocked account.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's good to know. So next would be the source of money, loan or savings. Usually people ask, is it okay if we send it through our education loan or from savings? So is there any recommendation that you have regarding this?
Makes no difference.
Okay.
The only difference is if you are taking a loan, then you have no say in which bank you are using to know.
Yeah.
So basically, the loan provider decides how they are transferring the money because they do not give the funds to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the education loan works. And if it is that's the only difference.
Okay,
if it is savings, then you will be able to choose
your provider.
Yeah,
right.
and then,
it's more or less the same, but one is more of a narrow approach because you only have the bank or the loan provider,
Exactly.
and the other one you have variety of choices.
Yes, true.
Okay. So the next question would be transferring the amount in installments, because there are some cases where students want to send their 11,000 euros in 3 installments or 2 installments. Is there a limit for it, or is there a particular? Is there a difference in how it works when you send it in installments?
No, it's possible to send in multiple transactions, but personally, I wouldn't recommend going more than 3, because we're talking about all the fees and fixed fees and transaction fees and so on and so on. So the multiple transactions just simply make the whole transaction expensive, and if the money is coming from your account, let's say, you can do it once you have all the money, because without having the full amount in the blocked account, you are not going to get this confirmation certificate anyway.
Right.
But sometimes, often, you want to send half the money, your father or mother might want to send half the money, so then it's natural, you do it parallel, or you do it first now, till when then maybe a week or month later the second transaction happens. It's totally fine. Technically there is no limit to it, but more transactions, meaning it attracts more, costs.
Charges in between,
That's
yes.
the only thing.
Okay, so we should be mindful when it comes to considering these charges when we start transferring.
Exactly.
And so this was the last question. Reference text. So there have been cases where the reference text was a little too long than expected. Is it okay, or what happens if it's too long, or is there any workaround for it?
It's absolutely okay. So for the Swift messaging, so we have our reference text in the payment instruction. It's mentioned. It's pretty short, but depends on the country. The local banks might have their regulatory requirements that they need to add additional their local transaction IDs, the purpose of the transaction. All these things go in. So the student doesn't need to worry about it. But the only thing is important is in this long bunch of additional reference text that the banks add to that, we need to make sure our reference text is at least in that.
Okay.
This is what, but it's been instructed clearly in the details sheet that we give, and it normally works fine.
Okay. So that totally works fine. Then that's good to know. Do you have any key takeaways for transferring money to the blocked account, especially because when it comes to international transfer, it is a little more complex, as we have discussed. So
if someone have skipped the whole video and landed here, so don't wait till last minute. At least keep a week time ahead. It will save a lot of headache for you, and be cautious in terms of finding and selecting the right provider. Makes a huge difference. It's not always the cheapest, and it's not always the fanciest. Find the right one, and always get the Swift copy, and also verify the details. Just you can have a safe, peace of mind. And in case of delay, also don't wait too long. And then go to the bank or the provider and initiate a tracer. This
Okay.
will make the whole international transaction, the domestic transfer, much more easier.
Wow. Thank you so much for the recommendation and the key takeaways. And this was really informative because it really opens avenues on how you go about the process. It can be really overwhelming when students pick up the concept of moving to Germany as for their studies. So this really makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
So
Hope it helps.
yeah. Anyway, so that's it for this video. If you really like the information, tune in for more with Coracle. Check out our website and like, share, and subscribe. Okay.
Okay.
Bam.
Cool. Yeah. Nice.
That was fast.
Quick.